How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So, I'm sure you've heard of Thanksgiving. It's celebrated in the United States, of course. Evidently, Thanksgiving has a connection to the Dutch. So we have a suggestion request by Dolly. Shout out to you, Dolly. You're amazing. Love the suggestions. We have Leiden, the Dutch connection to Thanksgiving. So evidently, Leiden is obviously a city in the Netherlands, and I can't remember what province it is exactly, but it has something to do with Thanksgiving. So that's super cool. We have the History Guy, is the original channel. So links down below for that. Definitely go check out his channel. I've done some reactions to his videos before, and great channel. A lot of information, a lot of good information. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and push play on this. Thanks for watching with me, guys.
This episode of The History Guy is brought to you by MOBA Globes. Sit back, watch them spin, and be amazed.
Be amazed. Well, we're going to check out those globes. That actually looks pretty sweet.
When you think of early European settlers to the part of the New World that would become the United States, the Puritans certainly come to mind. They played a central role in establishing the colonies as a place of religious freedom. Their habits still impact our culture today, and several presidents are descended from them. But it might surprise many Americans to find out that the Pilgrims didn't come here directly from England on the Mayflower, but rather many of them first spent 12 years in a Dutch city that played a significant role in influencing and cementing their beliefs.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember hearing about this in another video actually. Yeah, they were in the Netherlands first. I don't remember why. I think they left England because they didn't want to be in England no more, right? And then but there was nowhere to go, so like they hung out in the Netherlands for a while or something, and then the opportunity came to go to the New World, I believe. I don't know for sure. Just vaguely sounds familiar. I'm sure he'll cover it though. Let's continue.
The quaint university city of Leiden and its impact on U.S. history deserves to be remembered.
Okay.
The Pilgrims, although that term would not come to be applied to them until after their voyage to the New World, were a group of English Puritans whose beliefs were seen as too extreme by King James I of England. While there were several questions of doctrine involved, the fundamental issue was that the Puritans believed that the English Reformation had not gone far enough and sought to remove from the Anglican Church what they saw to be Roman Catholic practices. In fact, the term Puritan refers to a desire to purify the Church of England. While there was a range of views, some more radical Puritans sought to wholly separate themselves from the Church, and these were called Puritan separatists. In 1603, when after the death of Elizabeth I, the crown passed to James I, the Puritans hoped that James's Scottish Calvinist upbringing would bring more reform. However, James I's reforms did not go far enough for some, and those who disagreed faced various forms of persecution, although haphazardly enforced. Fearing this persecution, some more radical groups sought to leave England for a place to live where the members could freely practice their religion and live according to the rules that they had set for themselves. This was not an easy path, as it was illegal for them to immigrate. Several were imprisoned for failed attempts. Holland became a haven for the fleeing English separatist families.
So it was illegal to immigrate. So I wonder why. So Leiden, I'm going to look on my other tab here. Leiden is where at? Okay, it's in one of the Holland provinces. South Holland, perhaps? Okay, so it's in between The Hague and Amsterdam, a little closer to The Hague. Okay. So let's see, there, and let's see, so Amsterdam's up here. The Hague's down here, so Leiden's like somewhere in this area right here, somewhere in that area.
The Dutch were unusually tolerant, having themselves suffered religious persecution by Spain. The so-called Dutch Revolt was driven by a number of issues, both political and religious, but a central point was a Protestant revolt against the Catholic Church. Okay. And so the Dutch Republic had become a place for Protestants fleeing persecution elsewhere. The rebellion 7 Dutch provinces had declared their independence from Catholic Spanish Habsburg rule in 1581 in the Act van Verlachting, literally the Act of Departure, and more commonly called the Declaration of Independence. This
which we basically copied as a template for the Declaration of Independence in the United States, I believe, by the way, for anybody that is unaware.
document would have an influence on the fledgling United States nearly 2 centuries later. The Committee of Five was well aware of the existence of this document, and the American Declaration of Independence from 1776 borrowed passages, most notably the principle that citizens have the right to abandon their monarch if he does not respect the laws and traditional freedoms of the citizens. By 1608, the year the English Puritans managed to flee England, the war had largely turned into a stalemate, and in 1609 a 12-year truce was declared, although it was not a permanent peace, and Spain still did not recognize Dutch independence. While they first settled in Amsterdam, they quickly got caught up in rivalries with other Protestant factions who had, for similar reasons, fled England. Moreover, living was difficult in the Dutch capital, where restrictive guild rules essentially limited immigrants to manual labor. After just 9 months, they decided to relocate to the city of Leiden. Leiden had a renowned cloth industry. Its prestigious university, the oldest in the Netherlands, had been established 34 years earlier in 1575. Was a present by William of Orange to the people of Leiden for the heroic resistance against Spanish occupation during the first years of the 80 Years Dutch War for Independence.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is definitely around the 80 Years War, but if this is the early part of it, right?
In this period, Leiden was the second largest city of the Dutch Republic after Amsterdam. It had tripled in size in 50 years, going from 15,000 just prior to the Spanish siege of the city in 1574 to 45,000 inhabitants soon after the Pilgrims' departure in 622.
Okay, wow. So Leiden was bigger. So Rotterdam and The Hague and Utrecht and all these places that are bigger now have just grown since then, it seems like.
Leiden's historical writer, Jerome Winmeyer, notes many believers and persecuted individuals found shelter in Leiden. These were, of course, refugees with a Protestant background, such as...
Also, it looks like Leiden was a star fortress city. Very cool. You got like a canal all the way around with the little pointy bits. I don't remember. There's a name for them. The little lookout post areas. Wonder how much of that is still there today.
Walloon Protestants, separatists from England, and Huguenots from France. But other believers could also find refuge here, such as Catholics, Mennonites, Anabaptists, Lutherans, and Jews. About 1/3 of the Leiden population at this time consisted of refugees. This tolerance from the Leiden city government would certainly have appealed to the Pilgrim Fathers. Their move to Leiden was carefully orchestrated, and in a now famous letter, City Secretary Jan van Hout gave them permission to move to Leiden on 12 February 1609, saying that Leiden refuses no honest people free entry to come live in the city, as long as they behave honestly and obey all the laws and ordinances, and under those conditions the applicant's arrival here would be pleasing and welcome. At the time, people who migrated to Leiden didn't need permission to do so, so it's curious why the Pilgrims did.
Okay, so I guess the 80 Years' War was from around 1566 to 1648. I thought it was a little later. I thought it started early 1600s and then ended kind of towards, 1680s-ish, 1690s, but I guess it was offset. I'm 40 years off, so it ended in 1648. This one here shows it as 1621 to 1648. Okay, that one's the final phase of the year. Okay, so that's the last half of it. Okay, yeah.
According to the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum, they did this to make sure that if something happened to them, their offspring could be taken care of by the city's orphanage and not sent back to where their parents came from, which was the usual practice for immigrant orphans.
Wait, is that saying like a birth, citizenship by birth kind of a situation? I must have missed it. I was looking up the 80-Year War thing.
Is to make sure that if something happened to them, the applicant's arrival here would be pleasing and welcome. At the time, people who migrated to Leiden didn't need permission to do so, so it's curious why the Pilgrims did. According to the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum, they did this to make sure that if something happened to them, their offspring could be taken care of by the city's orphanage and not sent back to where their parents came from, which was the usual.
Okay, so just if they went around, or if they went about it in a formal, like, permission kind of thing, it secures the safety of the generations after them, I feel like. So it wasn't necessary for them to do that. I guess it said you didn't have to have permission or anything. It's just they were just trying to cover their asses, it sounds like.
Usual practice for immigrant orphans. This suggested that in 1609, the Pilgrims were thinking about living in Leiden for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
In Leiden, the Puritans faced the same issues all migrants do. They had to learn the language and find a trade to better integrate into the local community. According to the Leiden American Pilgrim Museum, the members of the Pilgrim congregation in Leiden worked in many different professions and trades. Leiden's trade guild regulations were less restrictive than those of Amsterdam, where most immigrants were excluded from all but occasional labor, such as unloading ships. In Leiden, a single guild member could hire helpers who were not members. For example, William Bradford, a member of the Fustian or Serge Weavers Guild, which met in the former chapel of the St. Jacob's Hospital, which is now the Lothe could thus employ other pilgrims who were not guild members. About half the pilgrims worked in Leiden's cloth industry as weavers, and wool combers, carders, cloth fullers, etc. At this time, about half the town's general population worked in textile production, which was thriving because, since Dutch de facto independence from Spain, it was no longer burdened by heavy taxation put in place by the Spanish king to finance his wars. They found...
I wonder when that painting's from. I'm just looking at it, like you can see like the classic Dutch architecture style of these buildings over here. And I don't know, this person's pushing a sled or something down here with like a giant sack on it. I don't know what. Okay, and there's a couple giant sacks here. That must be wool, sacks of wool or something, right? Something to do with this textile industry, I would assume. This is an old painting of some sort, I would assume. It's just kind of cool to look at.
Put in place by the Spanish king to finance his wars. They found residents in the direct vicinity of the still-standing Church of St. Peter, built in 1121. The court, with almshouses around it, called a hofje, now standing on the place they lived, commemorates the Pilgrims and their leader, John Robinson. Their occupations are mentioned in various kinds of documents, especially betrothal records. The occupations known for members of Robinson's congregations of documents, especially betrothal records. The occupations known for members of Robinson's congregation included tailor, hat maker, glover, hosier, shoemaker, carpenter, block and tackle maker, twine maker, leather worker, cooper, cabinet maker, brewer's employee, mason, watchmaker, mirror maker, tobacco seller, tobacco pipe maker, midwife, and merchant. The occupation of housewife and mother is not specifically mentioned in the documents and must have been considered self-evident. The congregation of Robinson faced the challenges of staying true to their faith without alienating themselves from the society that they were now a part of. An English Puritan congregation had been established 2 years prior to their arrival, but it didn't have its own minister. Like the Walloon and German Protestant congregations, they were considered part of the Dutch Reformed Church. Their rites and beliefs were identical, only the language used in the service was different.
He said it's the same as the Walloons in the Germans, so like Wallonia, like Belgium area? And then, like, what, the German side on the other side of the Netherlands? I don't know what he's talking about.
Considered part of the Dutch Reformed Church. Their rites and beliefs were identical, only the language used in the service was different.
Okay.
In those years, the Dutch minister would preach in English whenever he held a sermon for the English congregation. However, when the minister of the Dutch Reformed Church realized that the faith of the newly arrived Puritans was incompatible with his teachings, the Pilgrims successfully petitioned to have their own minister by September 1609.
Is this part of the reason why the Dutch people are the best English-speaking country out of any country that doesn't speak English, because of all this? Did this have anything to do with the amount of English speakers in the Netherlands? Like, you guys speak English so good, it might as well be a second official language for you.
Salary of Reverend Robert Dury was to be paid by the city government, as was customary. It's important to understand the local context in which the Pilgrims settled. With the conflict against the Catholic Spanish now in the background, a heated religious debate within the largely Calvinist Dutch Republic had arisen. The main apple of discord was the issue of predestination. The Counter-Remonstrants, also known as the Precisians or the Gomorrists, were a Calvinist group named for their opposition to the Remonstrants or the Arminians. The leader of the Counter-Remonstrants was the theologian Francis Gomorrus, based in Leiden. The core of the Counter-Remonstrance belief was predestination, which means that a person's life is predetermined. Everyone is born with a specific purpose, and individuals don't have free will to deviate from it, especially concerning their eternal salvation. According to the Counter-Remonstrance, a person's fate of reaching heaven or not was entirely predestined by God, and nothing a person did during their lifetime could change that predetermined outcome.
I don't like the sound of that, because that would that would leave open the door for people to like really, really, really abuse that and just be like, yeah, I don't, it's predestined. I'm sorry, I can't control it. And to allow people to lead very wicked lives and then just blame it on predestination. Now, if you're part of this religious belief and everything, I'm not trying to offend you. I apologize. I just thoroughly do not understand. It just doesn't seem, it just seems like not a good idea. I don't know.
Contrast, the Remonstrants, followers of theologian Jacobus Arminius, embraced a milder version of predestination. They believed that God predestined those for eternal salvation whom he knew in advance would become believers during their lifetime, allowing human influence on the possibility of attaining heaven.
The thing is with destiny, it's like, yeah, sure, destiny, like I get it. Everything happens for a reason and all this kind of stuff, but I'm also a firm believer that, yeah, sure, your life is definitely geared to go in a certain direction, right? Depending on your upbringing, your education, your finances, stuff like that, right? Certain people just obviously have better opportunities. It's just a fact. Some people are just born with a better situation to be able to do the things that they're capable of doing, right? Whereas other people are born into poverty, health issues, whatever, right? They might have the mentality to be the world's greatest engineer or something, right? But they just do not have the means to do it. Their situation just will not allow it. So I get that there's that part of destiny. There's that part of like your life is geared to go in a certain direction and there's not a lot you can do about it. But I feel like you can steer it a little bit. So if your life's headed this way, you can try to nudge it back. Might not help. It's still going to go that way, but it might go that way less if you just nudge it a little bit. Just whatever you can do to nudge it in the direction that you want your life to go. And maybe you'll steer course and eventually maybe turn back around and go in the direction that you want. I think destiny can be controlled or influenced in a way. I don't think that destiny is something that's just completely out of a person's hands, because then that would definitely lead to people just being wicked and being like, oh no, destiny, what do you do? You know what I mean? I don't know. Let me know what you think about it. Maybe I'm just kind of like looking into it too much, over analyzing the situation. I don't know. It really has nothing to do with the video necessarily. I mean, a little bit, but yeah. Let's continue. Sorry, guys.
Lifetime, allowing human influence on the possibility of attaining heaven. Reverend John Robinson, the Pilgrims pastor, played a role in the theological debates on predestination and free will at the University of Leiden. These debates were an extension of a theological conflict involving professors Jacobus Arminius and Franciscus Gomoras. The positions taken in these debates had immediate political implications and garnered significant international attention. At one point, King James I of England even got involved to express his dissatisfaction with a professorial appointment. Robinson was a friend of the counter-remonstrant professor Johannes Polyander. Robinson is known to have engaged in a successful debate against the remonstrant professor Simon Episcopus. Polyander, who wrote the introduction to one of Robinson's books published by William Brewster, likely played a role in securing permission for the Pilgrims to conduct their religious services in a room within the Bahainoff Chapel. The chapel had been repurposed after the Reformation to house the university's anatomy theater, library, lecture rooms, and even a room for practicing fencing. But as no classes or fencing practice was held on Sunday, the university allowed Robinson's congregation to use the building for their religious practices. These discussions showed both the depth of dissent over doctrine, even among Protestants, but also the extent to which the Puritans were able to practice their religion freely while in Leiden. Among the things that they were exposed to in Leiden was possibly the precursor to the most American of traditions. Dutch Protestants, remonstrants and precisians alike, believed in the importance of thanking God for what he had provided them on a regular basis. Regardless of whether they believed God had decided their faith at birth or whether God's grace depended on one's actions throughout his life, the Dutch Protestants were united in a desire to thank God for a good harvest. A Christian holiday called Dankdag, literally Thank Day, but in English commonly Thanksgiving, was in Europe almost
Dankdag. Yeah, because day is D-A-G, dag in Dutch. Dank, like thank, right? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
exclusively celebrated in the Netherlands. The full name is Thanksgiving Day for Crops and Labor, and it always falls on the first Wednesday of November. Various Reformed...
So Thanksgiving's Dutch. Do you guys still, is that still a thing? Or is the American one kind of overshadowed it and just now it's not a thing anymore, right? Very interesting. Another cool painting, too, by the way.
Movements have a church service in the evening to thank God for everything he has given that year. The Dutch evangelical public broadcaster EO notes there are similarities between Dankdag and American Thanksgiving. On both holidays, you reflect on what you've received and express your gratitude. It's likely that the Dutch Dankdag served as an early version of the American Thanksgiving. The Pilgrim Fathers carried their memories of Dankdag with them and adopted it to their new situation. However, there are also significant differences. Thanksgiving
Well, yeah, I mean, the food that you eat, of course, is going to be a difference because when they got to the New World, they didn't have the same kind of foods you had in Europe, right? So then, of course, they're hanging out with the Native Americans. They're teaching the Native Americans about culinariness, right? And the Native Americans, of course, have their influence in the meal as well. The turkey, which was a wild bird here in the United States, still is a wild bird. It almost actually was the like the mascot of the United States before the eagle, which is now, because there was just so many turkeys everywhere and everything. So of course the meal itself is gonna be way different, but the act of what you're doing evidently is Dutch.
However, there are also significant differences. Thanksgiving is a celebration for the entire American population, has become less religious in recent times, and is often celebrated at home.
Right.
It's
And that's because of the commercialization. Just like what Coca-Cola did with Christmas. You know what I mean? Like it's just commercialization. They know that everybody's not religious here, so they can't gear it towards a religious community. You're not going to get the sales, right? So you don't advertise the religion. You advertise the food, the gathering, the family aspect of it, and then you appeal to a wider audience, and then you can sell more turkey and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie and all, whatever else goes with Thanksgiving. They can just make that profit. It's capitalism. That is why it is the way it is. It's capitalism.
centered around food, particularly the traditional turkey, which frequently appears in American movies and on TV shows.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands, only stricter Protestants observe Dankdag, primarily in an evening church service.
Okay.
It's unclear when exactly the Pilgrims first came into contact with the Dutch Thanksgiving. Might have been before their move to Leiden when they lived in Amsterdam. Less likely is the first phase of their life in Leiden when they were still part of the general Protestant congregation in Leiden, because this period doesn't match up with the autumn months in which Thanksgiving is celebrated. Another possibility, perhaps the most likely, is that their introduction to Thanksgiving wasn't one single event. As their time in Leiden progressed and their understanding of the Dutch and integration in local society improved, they might gradually have come to understand, appreciate, and incorporate Thanksgiving into their own religious practices. A different theory suggests that Thanksgiving is instead, or perhaps also, based on the Leiden local holiday of 3 October, 3rd of October. On this day in 1574, the Spanish siege on the city of Leiden was broken by the Dutch rebels. The starving local population was given herring, white bread, and a Dutch dish called hoetspot. A dish
Yeah, I was gonna say this is, well, Stampot, Hutspot, whatever. Yeah, that was the siege of Leiden when the Spaniards fled. Because the Dutch took Leiden back. The Spanish dipped out so fast that they still didn't even eat the meal that they were cooking, and what they were cooking was Stampot. So when the Leiden people took the city of Leiden back, they basically had a meal waiting for them. So they're like, "Oh hell yeah, we're gonna eat this shit." And then now it became a national, not national, but a city celebration, village, city, whatever Leiden is. They celebrate it every year or every whatever, right? To commemorate getting the city back. And now Stampot or Hutspot seems to just be a national Dutch dish, which I made some before. I got a video about it. You should check it out. Actually, it's good stuff. I love it.
Consisting of boiled and mashed potatoes, carrots, and onions. This event is annually celebrated by the locals by eating.
But it's Stampot though, because the carrots makes it Stampot, right? Isn't Hutspot with the kale? Which I did mine. I did carrots and kale, so I kind of combined the two. I didn't do it the right way, but it was good regardless.
The same dishes, as well as a fair and a parade. The city's secretary, Jan van Hout, who had given the Pilgrims permission to settle in the city, was already in office back in 1574 and would die only months after the first celebration that the Pilgrims witnessed in December 1609.
Okay.
Celebrations giving thanks, especially after harvest, are as old as civilization. In fact, there were earlier civilizations by settlers in the New World before that famous feast in 1621, and the Native American Wampanoag who joined the feast held their own seasonal celebrations before they ever encountered the Pilgrims. Still, there is little doubt that the tradition so
because they combined it. So the Native Americans were already doing something similar, but I think what they were doing was just the end of harvest. It was like to celebrate the harvest. They've done all their work for the year. They've harvested. They got all their grain, whatever. Now they want to then kick back, have a giant meal to celebrate their harvest. So then, yeah, of course, that makes sense. You got the Pilgrims come over from Leiden. They got the Dankslag celebration or tradition, which is similar in a way of giving thanks. Okay, so I can see how it's kind of starting to merge together.
important to Americans today and intimately tied to Pilgrim fact and legend was influenced by their time in Leiden. Despite their ability to practice their faith freely, in 1620 the congregation decided to leave Leiden. While Americans are generally familiar with the Mayflower, their journey actually started aboard a ship called the Speedwell, which carried...
I have ancestors that came over on the Mayflower. I got ancestors that lived in Jamestown, the first settlement here. Yeah, very cool. My family tree situation, it's just really cool to look through. And if you guys haven't done a family tree, go online and do it. It's so fun. You never know what you're going to uncover. Really cool. I'm related to Pocahontas. Not directly, through her mom. So Pocahontas' sister. Pocahontas' mom's like my 12th great grandma or something. Super cool.
Them from Leiden to Southampton. Initially, Speedwell was to go to the New World along with the Mayflower, but the ship proved unseaworthy. It was a combination of factors along with the Mayflower, which carried them from Leiden to Southampton. Actually, started to leave Leiden. While Americans are generally familiar with the Mayflower, their journey actually started aboard a ship called the Speedwell, which carried them from Leiden to Southampton. Initially, Speedwell was to go to the New World along with the Mayflower, but the ship proved unseaworthy. It was a combination of factors that contributed to the Pilgrims' choice to leave Leiden and embark on a dangerous sea voyage to an unknown and, in their opinion, unsettled land. William Bradford, Pilgrim and intermittent governor of the Plymouth colony for 30 years between 1621 and 1657, mentioned several complaints in his journal of Plymouth Plantation. First, life in Holland was so hard that few from England would come to join them, unwilling to subject themselves to a life characterized by the great labor and hard fare with other convenience, which the Pilgrims underwent and were contented with. Second, old age began to steal upon them. Third, Bradford blamed the Dutch for the Pilgrims oppressing even their own children, and not merely their servants, with excessive work. These complaints might seem ironic, given the hardships the group faced in the New World, but even in Leiden it had proved difficult for the congregation to earn a living, and life had been hard. Bradford himself originally lived in an area called Stink Alley. Some members had returned to England as a result, and there was a fear the congregation would be broken up.
And if these are the people that found it, or came over and started colonizing the United States, and they were addicted to work, hard work, hard work, hard work, that would make sense why America is so work, 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 no vacation, work, 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 work. Whereas the rest of the world values their time off. They value their personal life. But I get, if they had to work so hard, then they come over here and then they had to work hard to establish and build houses and do whatever, it's going to be and end up being ingrained. But it's you need some time to chill. Everybody needs a little bit of time.
Even worse, he said, was that some of the children revolted, drawn by the bad example of Dutch children into loose behavior and leaving home. After a decade in the Dutch Republic, they feared that their children were becoming more Dutch than English, and they feared that their congregation would slowly disappear. Another reason Bradford...
They're afraid of the Dutch. Don't turn Dutch, guys. That's terrible.
gave was that the Pilgrims wanted to try to convert the Indians. Having had little success convincing the Dutch on religious questions, such as observing the Sabbath, they thought that there was little their congregation to do to benefit the community in Leiden, and they had a desire for a more meaningful missionary work. Finally, there was the fear of war. A 12-year truce with the Spanish Habsburgs was coming to an end, and already the religious debate over predestination had started to turn violent, with the Leiden city government having to set up barricades and hire mercenaries, fearful of a popular uprising. In the spring of 1620, the Pilgrims gathered their belongings and made their way across the Channel. After uniting with another group of immigrants, a grand total of 102 boarded the Mayflower from Plymouth, England, on September 6, 1620, to the New World, where they'd acquired a land patent from the London Company. Still, the time that the so-called Pilgrim Fathers spent in Leiden had a profound impact on the history of what would become the United States. No less than 9 presidents are descendants from Pilgrims who lived in Leiden. Presidents John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Ulysses S. Grant, Calvin Coolidge, Zachary Taylor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, George H. Bush, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. John Adams was the United States minister to the Netherlands between 1782 and 1788 and lived in Leiden with his sons John Quincy and Charles. His mission was to gain support for the new American state. John preferred Leiden to Amsterdam, stating that the company and conversation are better in Leiden, and sent his sons to the oldest university in the country. They enrolled in January 1781. The admissions register from the time containing their names can still be found in the university library. John Quincy was only 13 at the time, not an unusual age to enroll in those days. And according to Jan Postma, former mayor of Leiden and writer of John Adams and his Leiden Friends, Quincy Adams learned to speak fluent Dutch during his 2-year stay in Leiden, making him the second U.S. president to speak Dutch after Martin Van Buren, who grew up in a community of Dutch immigrants in New York and only learned English after entering school.
His name, Van Buren, that's Dutch.
Van Buren is the only U.S. president to speak English as a second language.
Yes,
Really?
we Americans tend to romanticize these Pilgrim Fathers. For people who were supposedly fleeing religious intolerance when they got to the New World, they established in Plymouth Bay Colony a theocracy that went so far as to banish and even execute religious dissenters.
Jeez.
And that likely influenced the decision to include in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution a prohibition against establishing a state religion. But it was also likely the religious intolerance that they witnessed in England and the religious tolerance that they witnessed in Leiden that also influenced the decision to include in that amendment a protection for the free expression of religion. President George H. Bush visited Leiden in July of 1989. He was a distant relative of Thomas Blossom, who emigrated from Leiden to the Massachusetts Bay Colony on the second voyage of the Mayflower. And there, in the very same Peterskirk, in the shadow of which the Pilgrims lived, he said, "It is here in Leiden that the Pilgrims came to escape persecution, to live, work, and worship in peace. In the shadow of the Peterskirk, they found the freedom to witness God freely and without fear. And it is from this place that they set their course to the New World. In their search for liberty, they took with them lessons learned here of freedom and tolerance." So when you understand how important that connection is between Leiden and the Netherlands and the history of the United States, then you see that in order to really understand history, you have to have a good understanding of geography. Or in other words, a good historian needs a great globe.
Oh, yeah.
This is that same globe you're...
Yeah, this is the globe part. Go check out his globe. I mean, you know what it does. It spins. It's been spinning the whole time he's been talking. Let me see where his code is here. He's got a code for this globe somewhere probably. It's in the link. Yeah, 10% off. Links down below, so you can find his link through the link that I have down below to his video. Very cool globe. Very cool video, actually. And I never knew that Thanksgiving had a Dutch connection. So Thanksgiving is Dutch as well. That's crazy. That's awesome. Thanks, Dolly, for this suggestion. You're amazing. Everybody else, you're amazing for watching it. Hit like and subscribe. You could even be more amazing if you did that. And you guys have a super fun, awesome day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye.